Hi, this is Amitabh. This is 7th of September around 5 p.m. in the evening. Uh, this is a continuation of a series of posts on the subject of Man Walks into a Rabbit Hole. What we're trying to really explore in Man Walks into a Rabbit Hole is the various kind of dilemmas or observations we make in life, we as in all of us make in life, and how that sucks us uh, into a loop, right? And a loopy kind of thought process that uh, some of these are very difficult to solve. So some of them are ethical, some of them are controversial. But today I'm not going to talk about any of this. Especially, I don't think I'm going to talk about anything controversial. And I would say anybody who's looking to understand the deeper motivations of us trying to do this conversation should listen to episode 1, which is, I think, a good summary of what our thought process was. What I'm going to try and talk today, this hopefully is a short snippet, but really wanted to talk a bit about the book again, which is Salt Houses by Hala Alian, which I had spoken about a few days ago. So yesterday night, I reread the last 20 or 30 pages of this book. Now, why did I reread it? The last 20 or 30 pages of this book are quite an exquisite meditation of what aging and confronting your own mortality could be, right? Definitely was for me. I mean, it made a huge impact on me. And I have a side story on this, a strange side story, but somewhere when I was in my very early 20s, which is probably about 20 years prior to today, I encountered what can be described as a near death or a quasi death experience, right? And what it did for me was it made me question a lot of very basic things around me, right? Like the nature of how fragile things are, or uh, how uh, ho- how brittle the balance is. I mean, the balance in this universe is extremely brittle. The balance in each of our little worlds is extremely shaky. And all it takes is for one random butterfly event for you to be thrown completely out of gear. So that really is a broad topic, and someday I obviously intend or hope to revisit that conversation at some point. Uh, but coming back, so I read this book and I read about the last 30 pages, and I would strongly recommend it for anybody who's looking into a strange exploration of aging, mortality, and what life in the end could be. Right? Uh, there are the second part of the book, and I said this 3-4 days ago. Also, the second part of the book is stunningly well written. The first part of the book is fairly slow. It's a fairly slow build up. There's a lot of details which probably we don't need to know if all you're interested is in the second part of the book. So let me start with a quick passage, right, from the book, and then maybe I can just share my quick thoughts and ideas around this, right? So the background to this is there is a lady. Her name is Alaya or Alia, however is the right pronunciation. And she is not the first generation person described in the book. So she's actually a second generation. So the story really starts from her mother and their family. And towards the end of this book, Alia suffers or begins to suffer from Alzheimer's, and she's now beginning to lose memory at quite a dramatically fast-paced run. and she's now beginning to, for all practical purposes, mix up things, right? So she's now, while from what is in the book, you would guess she's in her 70s or 60s or 80s, but she's thinking about events which happened in her 20s. So that's the background to this passage. And her husband, who has had strange but simple secrets in his own life, which also involve the family. While he is a very understated, very warm, very accommodating kind of husband and human being, like even with his children, he's like the father I want to be. Like he's an extremely loving and a caring father to his children. So he's never really been totally madly in love with Alia, but he's never really been ever antagonistic to Alia as well. So this is the background. And then at some point, as he sees her deteriorate, he is meeting with 4 of his grandchildren, and the grandchildren are beginning to, in some form or shape, pity him, right? And I could relate to even this aspect. So this is all the background to the passage, which I've still not spoken about. But I could relate to this, right? We tend to pity, like I tend to sometimes, I hate admitting this, but I tend to sometimes pity my own elders, right? My parents, my brother, and I pity not in a literal sense. So it might not just be pity, but I judge them, right? I basically say, look, in my head I'm going like, why can't you understand this? Why can't you just get the basics? Like, why are you not reading science? And this is all happening in my head. Versus externally, I'm extremely respectful because they're still my family. And more than my family, it's not about my versus yours or versus somebody else, right? I want to be respectful to them. They've been the people who are responsible for who I am today. And they have also been the people who are responsible for everything in my life, including my studies, my basics, my values. And my values absolutely teach me to be very respectful to my elders. So that's really the background. And at some point they start talking, and they're pitting their they start pitting uh, their grandfather, and he goes into what is considered uh, a very self-observational, self-aware kind of mode, right? And they all ask him things like, not ask him, but they implicitly are asking him things like, what's up with you? Why are you so down? Is this what life is supposed to be? And he's thinking about this, so he's not answering. So here comes the passage. So I gave a good 3-minute prelude to just the passage, but I wanted people to understand what this book is trying to talk about, right? So here comes the passage, 1, 2, 3. So he's thinking, what is a life? What is a life? A series of yeses and nos, comma, photographs you shove in a drawer somewhere, comma, loves you think will save you, but that cannot, full stop. Continuing to move, comma, enduring, not stopping, even when there is pain, full stop. That's all life is. He wants to tell her, full stop. It's just about continuing. and continuing is in italics. So I'll now read it without the commas and the full stops, right? Because this is a very beautiful poetic passage in writing, but it's very hard to convey in reading. So let me try this again, right? What is a life? Question mark. A series of yeses and nos, photographs you shove in a drawer somewhere, loves you think will save you, but that cannot. Continuing to move, enduring, not stopping even when there is pain. That's all life is, he wants to tell her. It's continuing. That's the end of the passage. I mean, that's all I wanted to read up. One last thing, right? So before I kind of conclude for today, or for this episode or this conversation, for some strange reason, as I was reading this yesterday, and I really cannot think of how our brains work, right? I came up with a strange memory. I must have been about 8 or 9 or maybe 9 years old. Definitely not 10. Definitely not in the double digits. And I used to live in a small, lower middle class place in just on the outskirts of Bombay. And I used to be a fairly lonely child for many reasons. One, I was a bit of an introvert, but also we didn't have too many people surrounding us in where we lived. I mean, not too many children of my age, or not too many people I could be friendly with or whatever. I used to cycle around a lot, which means I used to take a bicycle and cycle around a lot. And in those days, my parents were completely comfortable with me taking the bicycle and driving around the place I used to live. So I used to go as far as sometimes 3, 5, 10 kilometers away from home, and my parents seemed completely okay about it. I have no idea how that would fit into the modern world today. I used to do something very unusual. So what I used to do is, in about 10-meter radius, I had this habit of driving the cycle in circles. So I would just keep incessantly driving in circles, and I can still do it. Like even at this age, I can incessantly drive the cycle in circles. I don't suffer from loss of balance or giddy or whatever other senses which people struggle with when they keep doing this kind of repetitive physical action. The reason I remembered this, or actually I don't know the reason I remembered this, but when I remembered this, what also struck me in my head as I was reading this yesterday night was a very pleasant feeling. I mean, a feeling of, like, did I, as a 8 or 9-year-old then, driving my cycle in circles, know that this is what my 44, 45-year-old version would be? And while that's a very simple thought, it's also a very poignant, or a very it's a very rabbit hole-ish kind of thought. Like, what, my world was so much simpler, my world was so much nicer, my world was a world I want to go back to if I'm given a choice. And yet today I'm here, and I'm a product of my choices, which means I didn't reach here because somebody forced me to be here. I am here because I wanted to be here. And that's a very strange part of life. It's a very strange part of how we age and how we are, how we grow older, and how we confront our own mortality, and how we can confront our own passage through lives, right? And the other thing which struck me yesterday night, and this is my final thought, was in the larger context, and this is a question which I must have asked myself 50,000 times in the last 20 years, if not more. In the larger context, does anything I do today matter? Right? And I'll save it for another day. There is a lot of thoughts to be shared there, but for now, that's all. Thanks for hearing me out. And as I said, this is not supposed to be a one-way street. Unfortunately, the medium is more a one-way medium. But do write in. Let's have a chat. Let's figure out our blind spots. Write in at amitabh.mwrh@gmail.com. So it's amitabh.amitabh.mwrh@gmail.com. So do write in. And thank you all. It's a wrap.